what's happening in their own organization. When you take an Enron, it's worse. When the senior officials and company members are actively promoting bad practices, that's horrible. But nearly every organization has some level of fraud. One company that I worked with and we audited was a public company, and we found 3% of their bottom line, which was immaterial under some of the things because no single fraud was actually larger, was lost through fraud. Their stock price would have been 5 times as high without that fraud. So being able to actually remove that made the investors better, it made the consumers better, it made everyone better. Fraud and corruption are some of the worst things on this planet. Bitcoin is designed not to bring down government, but to add transparency. It's scarier for many people. Imagine if you're a corrupt government official and now your money can be traced. That's horrible. That's something you don't want in your fight. Imagine you're a corrupt policeman who takes bribes. Bitcoin enables traceability. As a policeman who takes bribes, you now have a system that will record immutably so that 5 years later someone can do an investigation and find out where money came. That's scary. It doesn't bring down government. It allows it to be audited and it allows traceability. The housing crisis resulted because of a whole lot of stupid decisions, a whole lot of policy decisions that were wrong, but mostly traceability. The average CDS had about 1 to 3 million entries, of which no one in their right mind could ever trace. No one understood what was actually in these securities. No one could actually analyze them. There was no way. But imagine if you could make and securitize something online that you could put in a computer and track every single input. Even if you had 1 billion inputs, you could track and report in seconds. If you knew the reputation of every single input and every bond wasn't treated as a universal single asset, but could be matched, reported, and assessed, that's a different world. And there's only one way we can do that. It's to be able to track and trace all those inputs. When I was doing the creation of software BDO to do analysis using CATs, so computer-aided audit techniques, I was pushing for things like real-time audits. This would enable us to know not a year down the track where there's a problem, randomly sampling, but actually finding out every single thing that went wrong as it goes wrong. Changing the nature of the auditing industry so that rather than being reactive and causing problems by coming in there after there's a problem and going, this sucks, you're going to get in trouble, being a consultant. So if you're a Big Four or one of the smaller audit firms or whatever else, being able to come into your clients and set up systems so that they work and know that they're going to work and be able to prove that they will work. And then have alerts to the nanosecond about things like fraud. If something is outside of the normal bounds of what you would expect, be able to go to the store and audit the individuals because of exceptions. That's what Bitcoin's really about. That's what the whole concept of blockchain is about. Time-ordered transactions within law. And everyone gets this idea of it's decentralized. Lawrence Lessig, professor in the 90s, came up with the concept of smart contracts and decentralization. And people don't even listen to what that word means. Bitcoin is decentralized through miners because it's designed to be robust, competitive. The peer-to-peer layer is a separate thing for users. Users can now trust the system. Why? Because every single miner self-audits. We've seen this already. It's been proven. If someone makes an invalid transaction, they lose a block. The other miners enforce the rules. If someone finds something wrong, the transaction is lost. The block is lost. So you act in the rules. The last sentence of the white paper, people don't seem to understand. Miners don't make rules. The last sentence says miners can enforce any necessary rules. This is a huge distinction. Policemen enforce rules. When you get pulled up, you do not want a cop making rules. You don't want them saying, that street sign over there said 40, but I think it should have been 30, so I'm going to give you a ticket unless you give me money. That's miners making rules. Miners enforce rules. And do you know what rules include? Without exception, law. Law is a set of rules. Miners enforce rules. They enforce proceeds of crime. They enforce all of these things. And there's a lot of people out there seeking to promote Bitcoin as a criminal asset because there's a lot of money in crime. And if we have Bitcoin as an economic system that disincentivizes crime, imagine the line I made back in 2010, where I said, imagine if your Bitcoin, if a thief steals it, it turns to lead. And when you get it back, it returns to gold. There is no way of making Bitcoin in a completely decentralized system where every single user has a node. I designed it so you can't. It took me a decade not to invent Bitcoin, but to invent a system that cannot ever be relegated to that sort of system. You have to throw Bitcoin out and start again if you want to make it something that is outside law. That was what was so hard. So the answer here is miners invest. Miners invest a lot of money. They don't secure the network with hashing. They secure the network economically. They invest in hashing to signal the same way that a used car salesman signals so that he's not a market for lemons. Bitcoin solves Akerlof's market for lemons. Why and how? By signaling. Miners have a lot to lose. If they break the law, if they don't execute a valid proceeds of crime order to seize drug dealer or terrorist funds, that miner will have his machines sequestered, seized. He will go out of business. He will lose hundreds of millions of dollars. You tell me one person who will not make a change to stop, like just the few days ago, this large child porn network that were taken down because of tracing in Bitcoin. You tell me a single miner who will fight that, who will say, no, I will stop mining and give up my machines to allow child porn. I don't believe they exist. I believe miners are economically incentivized to make money, and to do that, they will follow law, and they will basically take down these criminal networks. And if you use Bitcoin for crime, you're going to find you don't have Bitcoin. Thank you.
Okay, so I think in our little intermission, we can basically take a couple of questions before on this particular topic. Does anybody have questions? Okay, what?
So you mentioned that you basically your career sort of came through the ranks of auditing and so forth, and this is a perfect tool to track and trace where money goes.
Yeah, that's why I occasionally do the Darth Vader bit. You know, everyone treats auditors that way. I mean, put the sort of black helmet on and
It's a necessary evil, you know. So, so I guess my question is, so we can trace Bitcoin from exchange to exchange, from wallet to wallet, and so forth. What do we do? How do we trace the coins that are mined and the coins that are traded OTC? So if we're trying to trace criminal activity, for example, maybe a criminal has a unique mining rig and they can just generate coins, hand over fist, they have all these funds with no apparent origin, and they also can trade OTC as well. So how do we trace that?
Well, here's an interesting little question. To actually set up something, you need a physical location. I'm sorry, but there's no virtualized things. And ASICs were the best thing to happen to Bitcoin. None of this decentralization BS. In 2011, there were some huge problems happening that were solved by ASICs. I'm very thankful ASICs happened because there were botnets of tens of millions of machines that were originally used for things like spam and whatever else, moved into crypto mining. And they were acting honestly within the rules, as Bitcoin said, but it becomes very risky when you've got random networks stealing people's electricity to make an honest system. So that's luckily gone because you don't steal with malware ASICs. But what you have is you have these investments of hundreds of millions of dollars. To be effective and really scale now, people are getting specialized power contracts. I know some of, like our pool and everything, we've got some machines and others I know, we get 4 to 4.5 cent power. To do that, we have to enter really long-term contracts and basically give the firstborn up as collateral and all sorts of fun things like that. And that means that if you do anything wrong and you lose those contracts, if you're ever going to do something illegal and not be traceable, then that Bitcoin will be seized, then your mining facilities will be seized, and you have IP addresses, you have everything else, you're not hidden. It's really, really hard to hide a $500 million facility.
Second question.
So you said the miner is the policeman of blockchain, I mean Bitcoin, and enforce the rule,
Yes.
include the laws of each countries. My question is a more like high level operation kind of type of questions, but like each country has a different law and regulations, and how each miner can enforce like different rule? Like they have to just enforce the rule they are in, or?
No, it's a bit more complex than that, but also simpler. My LLM, my dissertation for my law degree in Masters of Law was on internet intermediary liability. I studied internet service providers on a global basis and peer-to-peer networks and everything like this. What you need to actually do is treat them as a content provider, so an ICP or something similar. And once you start doing that and acting within the law, we come into a global law scope. So there are things like worldwide freezing orders, WFOs, and they have to be enacted in multiple countries. So to actually do a stop against Bitcoin doesn't mean that I get an American law or a Chinese law or a Japanese law. It has to be something that will be enforceable internationally. So there are civil suits which can be enforced in multiple jurisdictions. That's a different matter, that's private law. But for criminal law, you're not going to have someone like China be able to set the terms. It has to be across multiple jurisdictions. And that means that we're looking at things like money laundering, all the fat F things, all the things that are really heinous, sort of the major drug dealers, the major money launderers, not your average guy selling a baggie on the street. No one's going to care about doing international court orders because these cost millions. So taking down drug dealers at the large scale will work. On the other hand, being oppressive won't. So it's a balance.
Anybody else with